She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. It was clean, white, and undamaged. The air smelled faintly of fresh linen and flowers. A warm breeze moved through the half-open window. She sat up slowly and looked around the room. Everything was familiar. The wardrobe in the corner, the vanity desk, the full-length mirror beside the closet. On the wall hung a calendar. She got up and walked over to it. June 11th. She stood still for a few seconds, then moved to the closet and opened it. A white engagement dress hung inside, exactly as she remembered it. The day was the same. The timing was the same. She had returned to the past 5 years ago. Today was the engagement banquet. She sat down at the desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a planner. She flipped to the same date. Her own handwriting filled the page with details of the schedule, guest list, and time. She picked up the pen and wrote one sentence under the last item. This time, I won't pretend not to see. After getting dressed, she walked downstairs. The house was busy with staff and preparations. Someone came over to ask about seating arrangements. She gave short instructions and walked out into the garden. At the center of the garden, catering staff were arranging tables. She saw the exact same floral arrangements being placed. She remembered everything from before. Who would attend, who would smile politely, and who would lie. Later that evening, the banquet began. She stood beside her in front of the guests. Photographers took pictures. People clapped. Relatives gave speeches. Her adoptive family stood nearby, smiling and nodding. Her younger sister hugged her, made a comment about how lucky she was, and stood close to her. She watched all of it without reacting. The same scenes played out as before, the same conversations, the same people. Nothing had changed yet. Later that night, after the banquet ended, she walked into the study. The door was slightly open. She stood outside and listened. He was on the phone with someone. His tone was low but clear. He said he couldn't talk long, and that everything he was doing was for them. He didn't mention her name. But she didn't need him to. She stepped into the room. He turned around, slightly startled. She asked him directly if he loved her sister. He paused and looked at her without answering. She repeated the question. Again, he said nothing. That was enough. She went back to her room and locked the door. She took out a notebook and started listing everything she could remember from the future people involved in the kidnapping. Dates, places, and decisions she had made that led to her being abandoned. She created 2 columns. One was titled, What Happened? The other, What I'll Do. Under the first, she listed the engagement, the betrayal, the isolation, the staged kidnapping, the false accusations, and her eventual disappearance. Under the second, she wrote new steps. Collect evidence, protect finances, find allies, control narrative. She knew the first thing she needed was information about the people around her, about their communication, and about what was planned behind her back. She could no longer trust anyone in the house. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She stopped on one name. In the past, she hadn't trusted him. He had a reputation for being cold, aggressive, and difficult to deal with. But years later, when no one else looked for her, he did. He found her when she had been abandoned. She called the number. The line rang, then connected. He answered with a short greeting. She told him she had a business proposal, and that she needed his help. She said it involved protecting an asset that would be valuable in the near future. He asked her to explain more. She replied that it wasn't something to say over the phone. She asked for a meeting. He gave her a time and location. She ended the call and wrote the address in her notebook. The next morning, she got up early, left the house quietly, and went to the meeting place. It was a private cafe in the financial district. He was already there when she arrived. She sat across from him and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside were documents, copies of old contracts, company records, and evidence she had managed to retain before the last collapse. She told him she wanted to partner with him in a venture, and in exchange, she needed protection, both legal and personal. He asked why she had chosen him. She said it was because he didn't owe loyalty to her family, her or her sister. He was neutral, and that made him reliable. He looked through the envelope for several minutes. Then he asked what she wanted in return. She gave him a list: background checks, access to private communications, monitoring of financial transfers, and discreet legal preparation for asset separation. He agreed to help. She returned home that afternoon and resumed acting according to the original timeline. She smiled when expected. She spoke little. She watched carefully. Every evening, she wrote updates in her notebook: what changed, what stayed the same, what patterns repeated. She knew she only had weeks before the first major betrayal. But this time, she would be ready. At the dinner that night, her brought up wedding arrangements. He suggested simplifying the event, citing stress. She agreed and said she trusted his judgment. He seemed satisfied with her response. When they left the restaurant, she told him she wanted to revise their She used the excuse of better tax planning and inheritance issues. He hesitated but nodded. The next day, she met with a private attorney, someone her family didn't know. She requested an entirely new draft of the placing protections around her original assets and adding clauses for breach of trust, infidelity, and hidden financial movements. By evening, she received word from the surveillance team that her sister had contacted the same private security firm again. A meeting was scheduled at a cafe near the river. She changed her plans and went to the location first, sitting at a nearby table with a book and hat. From her position, she watched the meeting. Her sister spoke with a man in a gray coat. The man handed her a folder. She didn't open it on sight but slipped it into her bag and left after 10 minutes. She followed at a distance and saw her sister stop by a lawyer's office later that afternoon. She took note of the firm's name. That night, her didn't he come home. The official excuse was a business dinner, but she already knew he was meeting someone else. The audio confirmed it. They had discussed timelines again. He expressed doubts, but the sister insisted the timing had to stay the same. The plan was to remove the obstacle her within 2 months, once the first financial transfer cleared. She copied that recording as well. The next morning, she met again with the man helping her. She gave him the folder of evidence and asked him to initiate legal preparations, freezing assets in her name, documenting conversations, and building a file for future use. He asked her if she wanted to confront them now. She said no. It wasn't time yet. She wanted them to think everything was going according to their plan, because that's when they would make mistakes. She maintained her daily routine as usual, smiling during family meals, attending public events, responding politely in conversations. Nothing in her behavior suggested she knew anything. That was intentional. Each day, she received updates from the surveillance team that had begun contacting property appraisers. He was preparing to move a shared estate into a holding company, which she remembered from before. Back then, she had signed the transfer documents blindly. This time, she was prepared. She sent a legal notice through her private attorney, requesting a full review of all assets prior to any transfer, and demanded co-signing rights on all real estate. The notice was calm and official, but its timing sent a clear message. She wasn't unaware anymore. The sister, on the other hand, had become bolder. She started entering her room without knocking, borrowing clothes, making comments about the wedding plans. She made suggestions to change the guest list, remove certain friends, and include her own. The requests were noted but not acted upon. Later that week, she received another voice recording. In it, the sister spoke to someone over the phone. frustrated that the was hesitating. The caller advised patience and warned not to push too early. The plan had to stay on track. They were still coordinating with the same security firm, and the date for the operation was tentatively set. She had the date circled in her notebook. It matched what she remembered from before the night she would be taken and vanish without a trace. But this time, she wouldn't disappear. She would be watching. She arranged for all her personal identification and key documents to be duplicated and stored securely outside the house. She transferred a portion of her liquid funds into an untouched account under a third-party trustee. She made arrangements with her private attorney to activate contingency measures if she went missing for more than 12 hours. Meanwhile, the man helping her had begun background checks on the security firm. Their owner had several aliases and past connections to private mercenary groups overseas. No criminal record, but patterns of involvement in hush operations. He suggested digging deeper using a contact from his own network. She agreed and authorized the additional costs. 2 days later, another shift occurred. Her suddenly became more attentive. He brought her breakfast, offered to take her out shopping, and spoke about their future home. She accepted the gestures but noticed his phone was never out of his sight. Every few minutes, he checked it. He was waiting for updates. The sister, too, became more present. She offered to help plan the bridal shower, suggested vendors, and insisted on coordinating with the family photographer. Everything was framed as love and support. She knew better. At night, she sat by her desk and mapped out the coming weeks, marking the fake wedding photo shoot, the staged argument, the brief disappearance, and the return of a changed. All of it had been manipulation to isolate her and discredit her. When she started asking questions, in the past, she'd broken down after those events. This time, she would be the one directing the scene. She started collecting footage, harmless looking now, but powerful in context. The sister entering her room without consent. The checking his phone every few minutes. Conversations between them when they thought she wasn't listening. All discreetly recorded and cataloged. She knew a confrontation would come eventually, but not yet. First, she needed them to act, to move first, to step out of line. Only then could she reveal what she knew and take everything back publicly, legally, and completely. By the end of the week, she had compiled a full digital file of mails, audio, video, timestamps, bank activity logs. The man assisting her called it a war file. It was ready to be used at any time. Still, she waited. Because soon, they would make their final move, and she would be there, watching it unfold exactly as it had before, except this time, with her holding the evidence. With the date drawing closer, everything became more deliberate. They grew more distant when he thought she wasn't watching. He began slipping away for longer stretches, always claiming meetings or family business. But she already had the tracking in place. He wasn't going to meetings. He was meeting the same private contractor the sister had used. The surveillance footage showed him entering a discreet building, talking for nearly an hour, then leaving without a word. The security firm was finalizing details. The exact method of her removal was now being mapped out. Her contact traced the firm's latest logistics, rented vehicles, temporary phone numbers, and coordination routes. A van had been prepared, matching what she remembered from the first time. Even the license plate number had been partially reused. Instead of confronting them, she documented everything. Time, place, video, audio, sequence. All filed and ready. At home, the sister began taking on more responsibilities. She answered calls meant for her, gave instructions to staff, and acted as though she already had authority. The staff remained polite, but confused. Some of them had started reporting small changes in behavior: coldness, sudden demands, disregard for house protocols. She noted it all. To avoid tipping her hand, she made small but visible moves, calling a family friend for lunch, re-engaging with a distant relative, and publicly donating to a foundation in her name. These were not just gestures. They were signals, reminders to the outside world that she existed, that she was active, and that she had connections beyond her home. She quietly arranged for 2 private bodyguards to be stationed nearby. They weren't there to intervene yet. They were simply to witness what would unfold. The man assisting her finalized a secure location in case she needed to disappear on her own terms. It was a short drive away, fully equipped, and completely off. It wouldn't be used unless necessary, but it gave her control. She wouldn't be dragged away again without a choice. 3 days before the scheduled operation, Her approached her in the garden. He was unusually warm. He spoke about dreams of starting a new business, about wanting to travel together, about simplifying life. She listened, nodded, agreed. He suggested a weekend trip. Just the 2 of them. A quiet getaway. She smiled and accepted. Later that night, she received confirmation from surveillance. That weekend trip was a cover. The location was remote, and the same van had been seen parked nearby days earlier. A second vehicle, unmarked, was also linked to the same firm. She canceled the trip, citing a family health concern. He accepted the excuse but looked annoyed. The sister called later, pretending to ask how she was holding up, then shifted the topic to legal documents. She asked if she had reviewed the house transfer papers. She said she hadn't seen them yet. The sister offered to The next morning, she received the documents in an envelope. The contents included a quiet clause hidden deep in legal wording that would give away full property rights in 6 months. She highlighted the section, filed it as evidence, and shredded the copy. That afternoon, she filed a private legal block on all transfers involving her signature. The notice was sent discreetly to the family's legal counsel. Now, even if she signed under pressure, nothing could move without a double verification. She told no one about the block. The sister called that night. Her tone was sharp. She said things weren't moving fast enough. She hinted that some things had to be done without approval. They remained silent during the call, only saying, "We'll handle it." She ended the call politely. Once it was over, she activated the next step. She met with a journalist the next day, under a false identity. She handed over a redacted version of the events of a fictional piece based on betrayal, power, and conspiracy. The journalist was intrigued and agreed to run it as a feature in the coming weeks. No names would be mentioned yet. But when the time came, the full version would be ready. Everything was now in motion. The countdown had begun, and this time, she was fully awake for every second of it. The final week arrived. The planned day of the kidnapping was 2 days away. The mood inside the house changed. They acted unusually attentive, offering to drive her places, asking about her schedule, wanting to know her whereabouts at all times. The sister kept dropping in uninvited, pretending to be cheerful, but clearly watching for any signs of deviation. She stuck to the plan, pretended to be trusting, gave vague answers, kept her calendar full of harmless tasks. But every step was monitored. The security team followed her silently in shifts, ready for the moment they were needed. The van had been relocated. Its current position matched her past memories, exactly parked in an alley behind a closed warehouse. It was stocked with supplies, had a fake license, and was ready to move. The same van that had once taken her away. This time, she ordered a hidden tracker placed under the vehicle. It would allow her to track every move, minute by minute. The surveillance team intercepted a phone call between Thee and the security contractor. The job was confirmed. The time was set early morning, just before sunrise. She would be taken while returning from her daily walk, a routine she had already abandoned days earlier. Instead, she would be in a secured location, watching the failed attempt from afar. That evening, she hosted a dinner at home. Everyone was present. They sat beside her calm, The sister was animated, cracking jokes, dominating the conversation. It was the same setup from her first life the night before it all went wrong. She smiled, nodded, responded when necessary. She didn't eat much. She had already sent copies of all files to her lawyer, to the investigator, and to the journalist. If anything went wrong, they would know what to do. Her emergency bag was packed and in a car parked 4 blocks away. If needed, she could reach it within minutes and vanish. Her passport, documents, cash, and digital evidence were secured inside. The night before the kidnapping, she barely slept. At 4 a.m., she left the house with her security escort and went to the rooftop of a nearby building. From there, she had a direct view of the alley where the van was hidden. As predicted, it pulled out at exactly 5:15 a.m. They waited in silence. The van drove to the pickup location. No one was there. They watched as 2 men got out, looked around, and then quickly returned to the vehicle. It circled the area twice before leaving. She received a message 5 minutes later. Target not found. The next message came from the sister. Where are you? She didn't reply. She waited until 8 a.m., then returned home as if nothing had happened. She acted confused, claimed her phone had died while she was at a friend's place. The sister looked irritated. They tried to hide his frustration. She went to her room and reviewed the morning footage. The attempted kidnapping had failed. Everything had been captured from the approach to the search, to the retreat. Later that day, they asked to talk. He said he was worried, that something felt off. She pretended to agree, offered reassurances, and said she just needed some space. He bought the excuse. The sister stayed quiet that night. By the next morning, things escalated. A suspicious fire broke out in the garage. It was small, controlled, but clearly a distraction. The same day, her computer was tampered with. She discovered missing files and a forced shutdown. She traced the access to the sister's device. That night, she backed up all remaining documents, changed all passwords, and called her contact. It's time, she said. They scheduled the legal move for 2 days later. It would be public, it would be complete, and neither of them would be prepared for it. 2 days after the failed kidnapping, she made her first official move. Early in the morning, legal notices were delivered to several addresses. One went to the family estate, one to the sister, one to the security firm. The documents contained formal allegations, authorized surveillance, attempted asset transfer, and an organized effort to remove her from legal standing. Attached to each was a digital folder of evidence, timestamps, recordings, photographs, and financial trails. She didn't wait for them to react. She walked into a law office and signed papers to freeze shared accounts, suspend joint property activity, and revoke power of attorney permissions that had once been granted under manipulation. Her identity had been verified in person. The requests were processed the same day. That afternoon, the sister tried to call. She didn't answer. The sent messages filled with concern and confusion. She ignored them. The next morning, the sister appeared at her door. She didn't let her in. She spoke calmly through the intercom and requested that all future contact go through legal representatives. The sister yelled, pounded the door, then eventually left. She called the security team and had the perimeter reinforced. Later that day, the journalist published the first piece labeled as fiction, but detailed and sharp. The events mirrored her real story too closely for it to be coincidence. Readers speculated in the comments. Some recognized the figures described. The online attention began. They issued a public statement calling the story a cruel fabrication. The sister stayed silent. Meanwhile, she filed a request for forensic review of the family business's finances. Her legal team began pulling threads from months ago transactions made without consent. Assets transferred out of her name, debts assigned without notice. It was all traceable. It was all intentional. By the end of the week, 2 companies tied to the were under audit. One employee from the security firm contacted her lawyer, requesting immunity in exchange for testimony. The man was part of the kidnapping plan. He had evidence of conversations, payment receipts, and instructions. She approved the deal. The testimony confirmed what she already knew, but now it was admissible. The man stated clearly that she was never meant to be seen again, that the removal was disguised as a disappearance, and that her rights and shares would quietly pass on. Now that plan had failed. The legal documents were forwarded to enforcement authorities. Her former appeared again at the door. He stood in the yard for 20 minutes before walking away. That night, she had a backup drive delivered to a family elder, someone respected, neutral, and influential. The message was clear. This wasn't personal revenge. It was truth, with proof. It was protection, not retaliation. The next day, her lawyer received a notice. A counterclaim had been filed against her for slander, mental instability, and false accusations. It came from the sister's legal team. She expected it. She sent her own file in response. Included were voice messages, security logs, phone tracking, and financial documents. A timeline from beginning to end, verified and signed. The case was dismissed within hours. The sister's team withdrew. She received no further calls. The silence was different now, not from confusion or manipulation, but from fear of exposure. The attempted one last message. He asked for a private meeting, said he wanted to clear the air. She declined. Her lawyer sent notice. All communication must remain formal. The countdown had ended. The game they thought they were winning had already closed. And now, they were trapped in the aftermath. The legal filings triggered a chain reaction. Business partners started pulling out of deals tied to the companies connected to him began facing questions from investors and regulators. His accounts were some assets were temporarily frozen. The sister's behavior shifted. She stopped showing up in public and canceled several events. Her social media profiles were wiped. A quiet panic began to settle into their side. She remained still. There were no interviews, no announcements, only continued documentation. Then came the internal leak. An anonymous employee from the family business released an internal email thread. It revealed that the sister had used her position to access confidential data and redirect funds. The thread showed clear awareness from others, including the leak went viral. The damage was done. The elder who had received her backup drive called a meeting. A closed-door review was held. Trusted family members reviewed the full timeline and supporting evidence. Their conclusion was unanimous. She had been targeted, silenced, and manipulated. The family formally withdrew support from both the sister and in return, they offered her restored authority over her portion of the estate and a formal apology. She accepted the restoration, not the apology. Quietly, she transferred her shares into a separate holding. She no longer wished to be involved directly. Meanwhile, law enforcement contacted her legal team. Based on the evidence submitted and corroborating testimony from the security firm, an official investigation was now underway. Both the and the sister were called in for questioning. They claimed ignorance. They denied involvement. But the records were already filed. The witnesses were already talking. At the same time, she finalized her next move. Using a clean entity, she purchased controlling interest in a quiet but powerful firm that had once rejected her application years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. This time, she didn't ask to join. She bought entry. Quietly, completely. She didn't announce it. She let the numbers speak. The business accounts reflected the shift within weeks. Supplier deals were Licensing applications faced sudden slowdowns. Contracts were retracted with no explanation. He tried calling again. She didn't answer. The sister attempted to contact mutual acquaintances to reach her. Each time, the message returned. Not available. The investigation deepened. The private security firm was forced to admit to multiple unauthorized operations. One manager resigned. Another confessed to falsifying records. The case now included attempted kidnapping and conspiracy to defraud. They were no longer in control. She never appeared in court. Her legal team handled every step. The press began circling again, this time more aggressive. Reporters connected the fictional article to the real scandal. Names began to surface online. Public sympathy shifted. The story was no longer seen as a betrayal between lovers. It became an organized plot against one individual who had survived. She received messages from strangers, some offering support, some telling similar stories. She ignored them all. There was no need for recognition. Only resolution. The investigation continued without delay. The financial misconduct was undeniable. The attempted kidnapping, though failed, was now backed by multiple witness statements, call logs, and location data. The case built itself, though was summoned again. This time, with formal charges under review. His legal team requested delays. The requests were denied. The sister's name appeared next in the file. She had signed off on several transfers tied to shell accounts. Her emails showed awareness. Her devices were seized. Their connections tried to shield them, but most had already distanced themselves. Business partners dropped them. Sponsors pulled back. Former allies deleted photos and broke contact. No one wanted to be associated with scandal that could be criminal. Meanwhile, she finalized the internal restructure of her assets. The properties she once shared were reassigned. The businesses split. Her name was now on independent titles only. No joint accounts. No traceable overlap. She also filed a formal notice to dissolve any personal or legal relationship with the. He was no longer connected to her in any form. No contract. No bond. No promise. It was official. He called again. She didn't answer. Instead, she filed an injunction to prevent contact. The media moved on to harder headlines. Photos of the sister leaving an enforcement building made the news. She looked worn, unprepared. Her lawyer walked beside her but didn't speak to press. More evidence leaked. One audio clip captured the discussing removal as the only way forward. His voice, his words, it circulated quickly. He issued a public denial, claiming it was edited. No one believed it. In private, she monitored the headlines, but never responded. Her life moved forward. New staff, new space. She had erased every opening they could once exploit. At a board meeting of her newly acquired firm, she was introduced as the new silent partner. No grand speech, no explanation, just presence. They welcomed her. No one dared ask about the past. She let the court do the rest. The sister attempted to flee the country but was flagged at the airport. Her passport had been restricted due to the open investigation. She was turned back and taken in for questioning. They attempted a final plea this time through a third party. He offered to settle privately. Money, reputation, disconnection from the sister. She declined through legal response. No settlement, no negotiation, only accountability. Her team released one final document to the Presan official summary of the charges. The evidence submitted, and the confirmation that she would not be testifying in person. The message was clear. This was not revenge. It was exposure. By now, the online narrative had shifted entirely. She was no longer seen as the passive party. She had become the one who turned silence into strategy. The court process concluded in the following months. The was found guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. He was sentenced without leniency. Multiple companies linked to him were dissolved, assets seized, his public image destroyed. The sister faced civil penalties. Her access to family holdings was revoked permanently. She lost her board positions and was barred from acting in any fiduciary role again. Though spared criminal charges, she was financially and socially removed. Neither of them recovered. She did not attend the hearings. Instead, her representatives delivered closing statements backed by evidence and written testimony. Her final words were brief. The truth had been shown, and nothing further needed to be said. After the final ruling, she completed the last of her transitions. The properties she didn't want were sold. The companies she didn't need were dissolved. The people who remained were those who had not turned their backs when it mattered. She didn't issue statements. She didn't celebrate. She simply continued forward. In the following year, the media lost interest. The scandal faded from headlines. New topics took over. The names once daily spoken now barely surfaced. Only those involved remembered the full story. She lived in a new place. Quiet. Independent. Her finances were stronger than before. Her legal standing unquestioned. Her safety ensured by people she vetted personally. Once, a journalist requested an interview. She declined. Once, the sister wrote a letter asking for forgiveness. She returned it unread. They attempted no further contact. His silence was final. She no longer looked back. What began as betrayal ended in complete separation, not just of people, but of power, control, and narrative. They had chosen their own paths. She had chosen to survive, and then she had chosen to win. No revenge, no violence, just truth, exposed and carried to its end. There were no reunions, no apologies accepted, no trust rebuilt. Only a life reclaimed. In the end, the consequence wasn't loud. It was permanent.